Um, so, welcome to this session where we'll be talking about innovations in oncology. We will keep this a 50-minute discussion, and kindly let me invite for comments or questions. Just raise your hand. You don't necessarily need to sit on the questions until we have concluded on the session. It's perhaps a little bit more interactive in case you just raise your voice or your hand at least. So I think we'll just do a short presentation. Klaus Andersen is my name, moderator for this 15-minute session. Thank you. I'm from Sunstone Life Science Ventures. So we have just raised the first raise of our fifth fund. We only invest in drug development, so no diagnostics and no devices. We are based in Copenhagen. We invest throughout Europe, and we like to see things when there is approximately 12 months to IND filing, or first in man if you like. So we have something that is substantial to do our due diligence on. We have done M&As in order to exit our investments, but we have had to do IPOs as well. So we've ended up with 6 companies listed on the NASDAQ major markets and 4 companies on the markets for startups. My background is PhD in mathematics, industrial track from diagnostics actually, and I think that's it for now. Catherine, will you take over?
Yes. Good afternoon, everyone. So I'm here representing Panacea Venture. Panacea Venture is a new fund, actually a spin-off from KPCB, the Klein Perkins Healthcare Asia. The Healthcare Asia KPCB was run by James Huang and his partners in Shanghai for the last 10 years and very successfully. And recently the James Huang and his team decided to come out and start a new fund, that's the Panacea. And we raised nearly, let's say altogether, close to $400 million to invest. On the one hand side, half of the fund invest in China, and the other half, so-called global fund, we invest globally, including US and Europe. So we don't have restrictions on what we invest, means therapeutic areas. We like drug development, and we like oncology especially, and but we're not restricted to it. We also go into infections, diseases, and some other field. And we like to invest early stage, especially if the scientific founders, spend all their career in tackling particular questions and accumulate a very strong science basis. So we like those type of investment. So we're just starting, actually, end last year, starting to be able to operating on this fund and for investment. So far in Europe, I'm responsible actually for European investment, and so far in Europe we only invested in one company, Oxford-based company called Evox, together with Red Mile and Google Venture. So we're looking for more opportunities in Europe. And myself, my background is a PhD in biology, and I run a company as a CEO for 5+ years. That's HOOKIPA Biotech, actually here based in Vienna. And before that I was the Senior VP at Intercell, also based in Vienna. So I'm venture partner now for Panacea, but still based in Vienna.
Yes, my name is Mark Hull. I am also a scientist by background, PhD in molecular biology, vaccine development for HPV, and actually spent most of my life in cancer drug development. And in the beginning of 2000, I started Oncology Fund, which is an investment fund fully dedicated to oncology drug development. So the only thing we do is therapeutics for oncology. And in that sense, we dare to step in very early. We dare to step in even from a very interesting target or a real novel technology, which we feel could be breakthrough in 5 to 10 years from now. And actually, about half of the companies we invest in were really incubated by ourselves. So we also do company build, we pick a technology and create a company around it. Our sweet spot typically is to bring the companies to phase 1, 2 clinical trials, show the drug is a real drug, it is safe and it does something, and at that point it's better to leave it up to the big pharma companies or the bigger investors to take it on from there. So no devices, no diagnostics whatsoever. We made one exception in the fact that we feel that for drug development it's key to be more predictive and better for development. We invested in organ-on-a-chip technology to really do a lot of readouts already in human systems instead of the plate, being as closely as possible to the human patient situation. We are now raising our third fund. We have 12 companies under management at present, and yeah, that's good stuff.
Hi, I'm Toshi Shimomura. I'm from Taiho Ventures. It's a corporate venture capital of Japanese pharmaceutical company, Taiho Pharma. And we are about $300 million under management, and so far we invested in 8 therapeutics companies in oncology area, from the small molecule to cell therapy. And we prefer to invest in the first-in-class or novel biology-based approach for drug discovery, and we will also prefer to innovative platform technology for drug discovery. And I joined Taiho Ventures 2 years ago, and before that I worked for Taiho Pharmaceutical and other Japanese pharmaceutical named Pharmaceutical for in total 17 years, and I'm in charge of the small molecule kinase inhibitor discovery entire pharmacy background, and I developed 3 clinical candidates as a project manager, and I have some role in early clinical development also. My background is a PhD in molecular biology.
Thank you very much. So in prep for today, we were asked to sort of to take on the glasses of companies that are trying to raise funds in the field of oncology, and we have tried to make our own questions. And in case we do not cover, please just let us know. So we wanted to start off with sort of setting the scene for oncology investments. How does it look today? Oncology is, of course, no need to say that here, is a well-established indication area. Science is racing along with shorter and shorter iterations. We have much better research tools than we had just 10 years ago. We have sequencing, doesn't cost a dime practically. We have many different ways of getting a deeper understanding of our particular indications in the various companies that we sit in. But as regards to getting these great ideas funded, what is the likelihood, and what are some of the biggest concerns? And I would like some comments from my fellow panel members here. But just at least my take is that there, in particular, immuno-oncology has become, of course, extremely popular. It's a new, activating the immune system in order to help fight cancer, a great idea. It's done in very different ways, though. And one of the big obstacles for getting financing today is to differentiate the particular product that you're sitting with from the rest, from the crowd. And I think that's definitely one of the major issues in case one is raising funds for oncology. And I think
I can kick off in that respect. So about the possibilities in the deal flow, I have a very disappointing message for you. We can only invest approximately 1% of the opportunities we see. So competition is huge. And I think the scientific developments are very impressive. It's like the ICT sector, it goes more than exponential. We know so much more, the sequencing indeed, the signal pathways we can line out. So there are a lot of very good possibilities out there, science-wise, developmental-wise. But it's very tough to select the right opportunity. What you see in many cases, the old blockbusters, that system is changing a little bit, although some of the checkpoint blockers are making great profits, but in general you see more you could call it niche busters, that it's a very dedicated target for a specific population which you're aiming for. And in that sense there are, again, a lot of very good opportunities out there. So in that sense, for funding, I also think there's quite a lot of money out there, but you really have to come up with something extraordinary to get the attention and the right partners to further develop your technology. Yeah, so maybe that's my first comment.
Catherine, you have any comment?
Yes, I anchor actually what you just said. Besides that, I of course competition is always there, and but I think right now is really the great wave of I/O technologies and I/O products coming up. So at the end, I think to differentiate your own company's advantages compared to others, most importantly is to see what problem you're addressing and what is your solution, right? So I think the great area we see now breakthrough certainly checkpoint inhibitors and cell therapy, CAR Ts, but still there are lots of drawbacks from those great technologies. For example, the PD-1, PD-L1, they're only addressing less than 20% of a patient group. So how your approach to help to expand that coverage of patients, right? So that's some entry point. And for cell therapy, very expensive, very lots of toxic effect, and for PD-1 as well, toxic effect. So on those problems, do you provide like solutions to those problems? So we see a lot of deals in I/O space, and the innovations are really incredibly impressive. So lots of companies try different ways to addressing all those problems and even come up with good solutions. But the question is, at the end, the validation of your solutions, right? So first it is a problem solution, and then it's a validation of your technology. So all this takes a lot of effort. Of course, take us as an investor to differentiate which company you want to bet your investment on, right? So, but at the end, it's just the science behind each projects, which are like real and which are just still fantasy. So we try to differentiate. Yeah.
Toshi, do you have anything to add as regards?
So that it's very much covered.
Yeah, it's difficult to be number 4 there, obviously.
Question.
Yeah, sorry.
Maybe too early, but I think I have one comment, which is, I think, a central issue in oncology, that is the stratification of patients. And in several ways. One is before surgery and during surgery. So if you really look, many of you mentioned PD-L1. Yeah, so what happens then? Yeah, so there are very good results with PD-L1, and there are some results that nobody knows really what's going on. Yeah. And so there should be, and now I'm talking about diagnostics, there should be a way that you can judge, okay, now it's ready for a change of therapy, yeah, during a certain therapy, or you should start with a different therapy.
I think that's a great comment, and also not referring at all to our investment strategy, leaving diagnostics. But I think having a therapy today, also to have a meaningful discussion later on with the payers, you need to be able to qualify the patients. That's for sure. It will definitely build up the valuation of a project like that when you're going to do something about it. For sure. And I think another aspect as well, getting a very deep understanding on the patient population, which of course is connected to the diagnostics, but with an offset in the disease methodology, or at least the pathology, the underlying mechanisms, that preferably at molecular level, so you really know which patient you should go for. And that's also where you could carve out an opportunity. Find that niche patient population that do not respond to the primary or the most popular drugs these days, like Pembro and the sorts. It seems like we are very much in agreement. So we also talked about, do we dare in an anonymous form to disclose at least some of the technologies at high level? Which is probably among the most interesting projects that we're looking at currently.
I think it's still, from our perspective, it's still very broad, because what we now see indeed, as the discussion is already going, it's IO, it's immuno-oncology, and of course we make very good progress, and it's an extremely promising field. But I still feel that also a number of other areas still are highly attractive, also for drug development purposes. For instance, one of our companies is working on protein-protein inhibitors, which previously was always called undruggable targets. I think with all the knowledge we have nowadays, we can design molecules that penetrate the cell membrane and are still big enough to do this protein-protein inhibition. Which gives you a very interesting tool to highly specific address some of the signal pathways and block those lines. So although I'm a very strong believer of immuno-oncology and we invest heavily in it, I think there are also still a lot of other opportunities, like also the nucleic acid based compounds, which we have seen suffered a lot from delivery. A lot of the siRNAs, microRNAs have suffered from delivery to the right cell type in sufficient amounts. Also there we see now a second generation coming who are able to get sufficient in the cell. So also the nucleic acid based compounds are highly attractive. So actually on the whole broad field of different therapeutic modalities, I think there's a lot ongoing. And a lot of those are, of course, and that's the patient stratification, that's key for addressing what population should get which drug. So I think in general there are more opportunities than ever for all the different drug modalities we've seen so far.
Toshi, what are you looking at? Can you tell us something about what you think is most interesting from a technology perspective?
So that we also interested in the immuno-oncology space, but we also looking at the outside of immuno-oncology space. So that because one point is that Mark mentioned that we also interested in undruggable proteins. Kind of the one approach is a product like protein degrader approach, and we also interested in that kind of the. I think that a recent understanding of the molecular biology or the sequence to allow us to deep understanding of the more complex biology, like the chromatin regulation or chromatin remodeling complexes or other more difficult targets. And we also interested in new target. One of our portfolio company, the Stone Therapeutics, is a RNA epigenetics company. It's a kind of a new field in oncology. Such kind of the new science that we are always interested in.
Okay.
That was a question.
Okay, yeah.
Given, just to follow up on some of the comments that we had so far, that IO field is very competitive. As an IO company, we all see that the bar is constantly being raised. So you mentioned a bit about what would impress you in future, 2 years from now. You mentioned about the patient stratification. Is there anything else that you think will be impressive within the next few years that we can prepare us for?
So maybe I will comment on the deals we're facing, we're looking at, and also try to address your question. As I mentioned before, the success of current IO still having room to grow, right? So and for example, lots of deals we have seen probably like earlier. for last year, and we saw lots of combination therapies. So we try to combine with PD-1 and PD-L1. There are lots of approach, try to combine that, expanding PD-1's efficiency. And then more recently, we're seeing a lot of cell therapy approach with a different type of cell sources, and on the one hand side, and also try to deliver CAR T into the microenvironment of tumor. So try to addressing solid tumor problems, and some approach try to escape from viral vectors, because viral vectors is not the easiest component to manufacture and to deal with, right? So and some approaches try to coming from personalized CAR T to generalized off-shelf CAR Ts. So lots of good work in that area as well. Some of our detoxicate the CAR T's toxicity. So I think really right now there's so many amazing ideas, and different scientists try to break through into the current problems, and so we are very, very excited about the field.
Yeah, maybe to add one comment, I think that one of the key issues, of course, in the development, what we're looking for as well, is actually normally in drug development you would like to see single agent activity of your compound. And in immuno-oncology that's almost becoming impossible now because the field is already so crowded. So if you come up with a completely novel molecule, you're in fifth, sixth line before you can even test it, and then the patient is already in extremely bad shape. So somehow as a company you should come up with a very compelling story that the combination with your compound would be worthwhile. And that's a tough nut to crack because there are so many different ways to approach and to stimulate the effect of the checkpoint blockers, for instance, that you really need to have a novel mechanism of which everybody can see that the synergy should be there, and that's definitely a challenge.
Yeah, there's one area I think it's also not forgetting. That is, I think 10 years ago, you and I looked very deeply into that's the cancer vaccine area, right? So though the cancer vaccine area did not give a good, successful track record, but more and more with now new technology coming up, and also the personalized neoantigens, for example, and I think it's putting the cancer vaccine still back into play. And how do you generate from this traditionally unsuccessful in cancer but very successful in infectious diseases? And we know this vaccine worked, right? So, but just how to adapt that into cancer therapy, and actually how to combine that with other therapies to maybe open a playground for other technology can play, and with the epitope spreading, for example, that's what a vaccine can do, right? So that's the area we're still interested.
That's a well put comment, because working with innovative technologies, new modalities, so forth, trying to present them to the well-established CSOs and the big pharmas, it is a problem to present, for example, a peptide-based vaccine or something that they think, because it was done 15 years ago, that it's impossible. So we need sort of to de-learn these guys, or wait for their replacements, I don't know. but the conservatism on the bio side is really difficult, and that's why we need those expensive and time-consuming POC studies. And Mark, maybe a comment to your single-agent clinical trials. I have to agree, because I know it's requested by the industry when we're presenting something to them, but it always turns out that it's more like it's used as a supplement really to document that you understand the MOA, because rarely, almost never, there's a commercial side to a single agent deployment. I totally agree. And there's also one thing we need to educate these guys on. And from my own perspective, before getting back to the question that we got just before, I think what we are seeing right now is we've been presenting with some amazing ideas about some glycans that seem to be specific for only cancer cells throughout all tissues throughout the body, which is pretty interesting. Suddenly a new and we're ready to put some money there because it's a pretty bold hypothesis, obviously. But if it works, it could be a fun return. So we're game, and this is risk financing that we're dealing with. And then another approach again, addressing the mitochondria. Obviously, you could have major tox issues in case it goes wrong. But in case there would be mitochondria that would be specific to cancer cells, that could also be an efficient way to turn off the metabolism in these unwanted cells. So a question, the question that was raised is, what do we think will be the themes some 2-3 years down the road with oncology treatments? And I think, unfortunately, that the jury will still be out on the combination studies. We already see that right now, that the payers are looking at a more and more differentiated market because we're cutting out all the patient populations, and we are having first, second, third line treatments, and we find genetic subgroups, and so it's difficult for them to maneuver. So there's a risk that they will also be out, and they will have difficulties in handling the very complex discussion when it comes to market access, when we come up with all these combos, and some pretty wild proposals have been made that the doctors should have larger autonomous decision power in order to find out what's really best suited for the patient. So it's less decided centrally, but the doctor will be operating within a budget. That's at least one of the hypotheses, and then within that budget, he or she would be allowed to prescribe some drugs. They are also talking about having the same molecule being priced differently for different for different indications, which of course is doable today, but the price pressure is such that a low price on an API will carry over to the high-priced indication area, at least over time and during negotiations with the payers. But there seems to be resonating on the thought that maybe it would make sense to have perhaps the same component paid at one level for an ophthalmology indication and a different level for oncology. So things are changing, and it's very difficult to look into the future because something has to be changed, is the general thought, it seems. I don't know what you guys, Toshi, you're sitting in the US, I don't know, what do you think about the future as regards payment and pricing of these oncology therapies?
Actually, I don't know pretty much about the US and Japan. So
Sure, but sitting there.
Sometimes Japan is pushing down the price of the oncology drug. We price the higher price than Nivolumab, but they cut pretty much amount. In the next year, they obtain from the melanoma to lung cancer. So I think that this kind of pressure is still already in Japan.
Yes, it's global. Any other comments?
Yeah, I think what you see, for instance, in the UK now with NICE, that they say, well, you can ask your price, that's no problem, but only if it works. And I think that's a very good signal for pharmaceutical industry to come up with the right biomarkers, with the right assays to select the right patients. And I think that's one of the strategies, at least, to make it more affordable. Because nowadays the pressure on pharma is not really high to go from 30% response rate to 60, and by such a pressure it would work. So I think on the biomarker diagnostic front, as I elaborated in the beginning, by developing, for instance, the organ-on-a-chip technology, that you can predict which patient is going to respond to what combination of drugs, these kind of incentives would work.
Okay. So do we have some suggestions? We started out a little bit touching upon this, but in case the people are sitting out there with an oncology project, how should they shape it? Not just as regards to make it different to the crowd, but perhaps also considering the clinical strategy, market access, TPP thinking, finding the right patients. Any comments or advice to
I think that most importantly for the investor who's seeing a lot of projects and to grasp the attention of investors, like a first screening steps is really to tell what is the story of your company, right? So what is the differentiating factor of your technology and the products? So that is the first way looking at it, because there's so many and in the same competitive field, you want what make you stand out. So that's the first thing we look at, and then of course beyond that it is your development strategy and your team, and what is the inflection point, when means your budget and all of this beyond. Still, coming back, the first screening, the different how your company differentiate from all the others.
Yeah, maybe to add to that, it is absolutely right, is of course the patentability and the IP situation about the product you're developing. Sometimes you see a very weak IP position, and that could be doable if there is a strategy to really strengthen that portfolio. If that's not there, then it's going to be extremely difficult. If it's just a technology which is more or less open or in the public domain, then you must have something extremely ordinary which you would like to get some attention from investors. And I think what in many cases we are indeed invested only in oncology, so we look a little bit deeper only to the technology. But what we feel is most investors would like to see also the outlook to the potential market in the end. And a lot of the presentations we get from early stage biotechs, it's a lot of science, but no outlook. What's next? If we put in 5 million, then we have good data, but there's no feeling what would be the next step. Is there a second fundraising? Is there an IPO? Is there an M&A? What would be the right inflection points? So I think for most investors it's also important to not only show for this round of financing what are you going to get for it, but what is the strategy of the company in the longer term and the outlook.
I think there are many science risks for the early stage company, and we are happy to working with that risks. And however, that as Mark mentioned, that we need to space to freedom to operate. We need to new IP to bring that product forward. So at the beginning, we may not need, especially in the composition of matter patent, but because we will develop a new molecule. So so that we need just a space for the patent, especially for the small molecule. And recently, as you know, the breakthrough therapeutics designation is a kind of accelerate oncology molecule development. We need to see the efficacy in the phase 1 study. So considering that situation, we need to think about who could be benefit for the drugs we would like to develop. So that we need to some certain patient population we want to quickly look at when we find some safety, confirm the safety of our drug. So that this kind of the vision may be important to engage the investor, the what you want to do, and what your story about your new science, backed by the your new science.
So sitting out there with an oncology project, the best thing is obviously to talk to specialized investors, like your fund, right? How many specialized oncology funds are out there, and how to find them?
There are a couple. I think I would say a handful. But then again, there's quite a differentiation between those funds. So we have, for instance, a Swiss-based fund, Nextech. They only do oncology, but they are more later stage. They would like to see at least an exit within 1 to 3 years from the point of investment. On the other side, we are at the very early stage, so from target discovery, target validation, and we have a span from 4 to 6 years till exit. And indeed, I do think it helps to go to oncology specialized investors, or at least Well, I hear from all of us that oncology is a very specific focus already. So I think most of the investors nowadays, especially due to the immuno-oncology space, are diving into the oncology field. But if you're at a very early stage, it definitely helps to go to a specialized fund.
Do you also take lead? Always
Yeah.
take lead or insist on?
No. That's completely open. Yeah, but what we typically see, and since we sometimes start the companies and invest in the early stage, then we are usually the sole investor. But more recently, we also started together with a couple of like-minded VCs, so building a consortium from scratch. And actually, that's a model we would prefer. Because the great advantage is if you could step in on day one with 3 more or less likewise investors, then you immediately have for the next years, you have your whole development plan, you can do all the steps instead of, speed is of the essence, of course.
Yeah, so we've done some statistics on different indication areas and how easy they are to fund, or difficult they are to fund rather. And we found that for oncology, at least for the last 12 months, 1/3 of the companies that actually had received acceptance from one VC did not get funding at the end. Why? Because it was not possible to get a syndicate together to fund the company. So it's not enough even. I was just adding the load to the companies, but anyway, it's not enough just to have the interest from one VC. In our, we can't, it doesn't surface with a Coke machine and 2 compilers and 5 laptops. We take serious money in this business. Thank you. So we need to be typically 2, 3 investors, perhaps even more. But it also pays off often, right? Because then when you are sitting with Roche or Novartis or whoever, they know that you will have the funding, so you can actually go do what you're saying you want to do in case they won't take the bait. So
in that sense, it also absolutely has our preference always. In some of the cases, you just have to do it. If we believe in the technology, we have to do it on our own. But we definitely prefer to team up immediately with other investors.
That's why we should talk.
I'm sorry?
That's why we should talk.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, there's a question.
How does it happen in practice?
So
the startup funds different investors and takes them together, or you call friends and invest together? I can see that the last investment Tayo did has 14 co-investors.
Wow, that's a lot.
It's like crowdfunding. How it happens in practice?
So I think that it's the kind of the company gather the new investors because of the, it's just before IPO and the crossover financing. So the companies are already attracted by the other investors. And sometimes we introduce the company, some our friends for this kind of investment. And sometimes company CEO knows their friend, so they directly talk to. So both ways are get together big number.
So we talk very much together, to be honest. But what you don't want is to have too many no's. So my advice to you, we'll start 4 companies, would be to try to keep those contacts in parallel up until a certain level where you think they're just about to be there, maybe even at term sheet level. Then you can start introducing them to each other. Because if you start earlier, getting VCs to talk together, if I hear 2 other VCs saying no, okay, maybe it's not that great, or it will be difficult to get the funding that's needed.
And also, coming from my previous life, is on your side, CEO, tried raising funds all the time, and my company was successful in the sense we always get investors. But my advice to CEO is, of course, after investment, you need to managing all those investors as well, right? so that's why Mark says we get the likewise minded investors together. It's very important because different investors have different interests and different expertise and different expectations. So to minimize your work of managing different interests, which is after deal, right? You should select your investors well before the deals.
Yeah, no, absolutely right.
Because you need to have like their interest should be more or less aligned. Then you don't have to facing different interests all the time, which is very, very time consuming for the CEOs.
And be careful, again, friend advice, be careful not to take business angels in that have never done life science investments before. Because when you start talking about curing people from diseases, they think this shit is $200 million worth after 6 months of incorporation. So it can make things very, very, very difficult. I know that in particular in the US there are some high caliber BAs and they can do excellent work and it's smart money and everything. Maybe even connected with VCs, but so which parameters should you look for alignment? And there will be investment size. So the VCs all have similar expectations as regards investment, how much money they will put in, have to deploy. The time, if you may have a mix of closed-end funds, 8 years, and then evergreens in the same fund, you can also have some conflicts. But I think, maybe it's safe to leave it up to the VCs because they need to pen it out. Some stuff can be solved in the shareholders agreement, some stuff cannot. But it's very important alignment. I totally agree. Any other questions before we continue here? We still have some 10 minutes left. So when we sit and define our investment strategies, people are curious, at least some of them that you meet, are curious to know how do you get your input for your investment strategy. When is it oncology? When is it immune disease? When it's this indication area or another indication area? How do we make sure that we invest in companies that can be sold in the future for the benefit for the founders and ourselves? So will you put some words on your strategy refining processes, how to read the industry?
Yeah, I think for us it's pretty obvious, I must say. No, so what we indeed are looking for is and that's you can call it a simple strategy, but early stage oncology drug development in really we are looking for the breakthrough technologies which will be becoming standard in 5 to 10 years from now. So that's actually more or less what we need to see, and in that sense we dare to step out of the sexiness of a technology. We dare to step in a field which at present may be called impossible or not relevant or whatsoever. If we believe scientifically wise it's sound, we dare to step in.
But Mark, who provides that crystal ball that makes you, what process is behind looking 5 years into the future with your fund?
Yeah, well, we take a couple of dice. No, it's extremely difficult. And the only thing you can do, of course, we have in-house, our team has a thorough oncology expertise, and we have a network, of course, of experts, key opinion leaders, which in cases we approach and we tell them our story and see how it sounds. Well, it's a sounding board, so if they come back and say, well, this is for those reasons, it's not going to fly, and we agree with them, then we won't make the investment. But it's a crystal ball. I fully agree. But then it always comes back to science. So if the science is really sound and we cannot shoot any holes in the development of that particular part of science, then we probably would dare to step in. And then again, as I opened, that we can invest only in 1% of what we see. And then it's really a gamble, and that also has to do with portfolio management. If you can invest in 10 companies from your fund, then you are not going to do 10 immuno-oncology compounds. So you also try to make a spread of different technologies, so some IO, some small molecules, some protein inhibitors, and also in different phases of development. So portfolio spread is also a very important topic as an investor to make a decision.
So certainly it's the science, it's the medical needs, and then it's the team, right? So you have a very great science, but do you have the right team to bring the science into products, into end results? So that's very important. And our team at the Panacea Venture, so among the venture partners and the partners, we have complementary skills. We have people that are really good at science, and people are good at the regulatory pathways and the regulatory strategies, and people good at building up the companies. So we probably more or less covering, from science to products, building up the company, the whole spectrum. So we try to judge from our own experience, of course, but still, of course, it's at the end, it's also the luck you get the right stars in your portfolio.
Yeah. Just
The Taiho is our oncology company, so that we yes, we focus on
Nice panel.
So Taiho Ventures is looking at the early stage. Our definition of early stage is a pre before IND, and that's one point. And what to say, so that we are basically looking at the new science, and the science is reasonable for us investing. And we like to avoid the direct conflict with our parent company, so that we had a strict firewall between the parent company and venture, and we wouldn't share the confidential information with the parent company, and looking at the new outside of the parent company's activities. Taiho is mainly focusing on the small molecules, so that we are mainly going beyond the small molecule drug discovery at this point.
okay. And I can just tell for myself. So over the years, we've sold some companies to the big ones, and this means that now we have some connections, some persons we've been negotiating with and talked to because we're following up on the milestones that they're supposed to pay us for, and we use these guys to talk and to spar with as regards what their corporate strategies are, what they're looking for, and they're extremely commercial driven. So typically, it's very uninteresting on a scientific level because they are just like they have just identified some high potential paying patient populations or high volume patient groups that they want to address. What we also did, we made an investment in Centaurus, which we sold after not too long to Roche for almost $500 million. We actually did that because the Nobel Prize was given 2 years ahead in a new mechanism of action. And so we just, do we have anything in the pipeline that is hitting on this or is related to this very hot new topic? And that's why we made that investment. And similarly, we are now looking for STING pathway companies because that seems to be pretty up and coming. And also, for every month, more and more validated. So we're probably also making a bet there, to be very concrete.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think to be aware of always on top of the most recent innovations, right? The CRISPR, the gene therapy, and STEAM and STRONG or whatever. So be aware of all those great new science coming up and how that apply into product translation.
Yeah. So we're almost at the end here. Are there any questions you would like to discuss or a point you want to raise with us? Okay. Do you have any more comments or wise words you want to share?
Always. No, I think what probably has become clear of this panel is that there's a lot of appetite. There's a lot of money out there. There's a lot of appetite in this oncology session in novel oncology drugs, but it's very difficult to get the attention of investors because everything needs to fit. The technology should be there, the management should be there, the market should be there. So you should try to make everything as comprehensive and as complete as possible to stand out of the crowd of all the other beautiful inventions that are out there. And that's not an easy task, but never refrain to ask for advice from partners you might know or colleagues. Try to build the story as good as possible, and that's the only advice we can give. And be honest, of course. Not overselling to some extent is nice. You should make us hungry. We should see that carrot in front of us. But if it's too far away, reality is more important to see that we know what you're talking about and that it's sound. That's I think some of the comments.
Good advice.
We always did this hockey stick. You invest 1 million now, you get 100 back. Well, if we see that hockey stick, it's already gone.
Yeah, exactly.
We don't take it serious.
Be careful, it's written into the investment agreement. So if you don't meet these targets, then no. Anyway, I think often when we are talking about very gifted CSOs, founders, when we suggest something or say maybe it's not like that, but it could be like this. Sometimes it's received the wrong way, and we are not here just to bother founders. We're here to share some comments and advice. So maybe a good attitude would not be to be defensive, but more listening when you talk to guys like us. And the strategy that I've applied myself when I started companies is to visit the least important VCs first, do your presentation, listen carefully what they're saying. And then improve your presentation before you go to the ones you really want to have on board. So, time out, it says the sign down there. Okay.
This last word, I think, being passionate about what you're doing, and you're the first one who need to really believe what you're doing, and you're doing whatever you do is great because you're tackling the most important disease and cancer.
Yes, I agree. Thank you very much.